My sweet Audrina. Happy Sanders. Part 1. Whitefern. There was something strange about the house where I grew up. There were shadows in the corners and whispers on the stairs, and time was irrelevant as honesty, though how I knew that I couldn't say. There was a war going on in our house, a silent war that sounded no guns, and the bodies that fell were only wishes that died, and the bullets were only words, and the blood that spilled was always called pride. Though I had never been to school, and I was 7 years old, and it was high time I was in school, it seemed I knew all about the Civil War. Around me the Civil War was still being waged, and though the future might stretch ahead for billions of years, it was still the war we'd never forget, for our pride had been injured, and our passions were lingering on. We lost the battle better won by the opposite side. Maybe that's why it kept still hurting. Mama and my Aunt Elizabeth always said that men liked violent discussions about wars better than any other topic, but if there were other wars of any importance at all, they were never discussed in our house. Papa would read any book, see any movie, cut out any magazine photo that represented that war between the brothers, even though his ancestors had fought against my maternal ones. He was Yankee-born, but a Southerner by preference. At the dinner table, he'd recount the plots of the long novels he'd read about General Robert E. Lee, and give grisly accounts of all the bloody battles. And most of what he read charmed me. It did not charm either my aunt, who preferred the television, or my mother, who preferred to read her own books, claiming Papa left out the best parts, which weren't fit for young ears to hear. That meant my ears and my cousin Vera's ears. Though most of the world believed Vera to be my sister, I knew she was my unmarried aunt's illegitimate daughter, and that we had to shield her from the scorn of society by pretending she was my legitimate older sister. I did have a legitimate older sister, too, but she had died before I was born. Her name was also Audrina, and even though she had been dead a long time, still she lingered on. My papa never forgot the first and the best Audrina, and still hoped that someday I would be as special as she was. My cousin Vera liked people to think she was my sister. I didn't know her true age, for she refused to tell me that. Nobody in our house ever revealed their ages. Only my age was talked about all the time. It was Vera's boast that she could be any age she wanted to be, 10, 12, 15, 20. With a few elegant and sophisticated postures, truly she did change her manner and expression. She could look very mature or very childlike depending on her mood. She liked to ridicule me because I was so uncertain about time. Often Vera told me I'd hatched full-blown from a giant ostrich egg at the age of 7. She always said that I had inherited that bird's famous habit of sticking its head in the sand and pretending nothing in the world was wrong. She didn't know about my dreams and the ugliness they gave me. From the very beginning I knew Vera was my enemy, even when she pretended to be my friend. Though I wanted her for my friend in the worst way, I knew she hated me. She was jealous because I wasn't Audrina, and she wasn't. Oh, how I wanted Vera to like and admire me, and sometimes I really liked and admired her. I envied her, too, because she was normal and didn't have to try to be like someone who was dead. No one seemed to care if Vera wasn't special. No one except Vera. Vera was fond of telling me that I wasn't really special either. I was merely strange. To tell the truth, I thought there was something strange about me, too. I seemed to be unable to recall anything about my early childhood. I couldn't remember anything about the past, what I had done this week, or things the day before. I didn't know how I had learned the things I knew, or why I seemed to know some things I shouldn't. The many clocks scattered throughout our giant house confused me even more. The grandfather clocks in the hall chimed out different hours. The cuckoos and their wooden Swiss clocks popped in and out of small ornate doors, which contradicted all the others. The fancy French clock in my parents' bedroom had stopped long ago at midnight or noon, and a Chinese clock ran backwards. To my great distress, though, I searched everywhere. There was no calendars in our house, not even old ones. And the newspapers never came on the day they were due. Our old magazines were old ones, stacked in closets, hidden in the attic. Nobody threw anything away in our house. It was kept, save our descendants, so they could sell it one day and make a fortune. Much of my insecurity had to do with the first Audrina, who had died exactly 9 years before I was born. She had died mysteriously in the woods, after cruel and heartless boys had spoiled her in some undesirable way. And because of her, I was never supposed to enter the woods, even to go to school. And the woods were all around us, almost smothering us. They embraced us on 3 sides. The river lay on the 4th. To go anywhere, we had to travel through the woods. Everywhere in her home, photographs of the first and best Audrina were scattered. On Papa's desk, there were 3 framed portraits of her at age 1, 2, and 3. There was not one single baby picture of me, not one. And that hurt. The first Audrina had been a beautiful little girl, and when I looked at her photographs, I felt oddly haunted. Wanting to be her so badly, I ached inside. I wanted to be her so I'd feel as loved, as special as everyone said she'd been. And then again, contrarily, I wanted more than anything to be myself, and on my own merits, gain the love I felt denied me. The tales Papa could tell about the wonders of his first daughter, and everyone he told me made me know I was not the best Audrina, not the perfect and special one, only the second and the inferior one. My parents kept the first Audrina's bedroom like a shrine for a dead princess. It was left exactly as it had been on the day that she met her fate, which was never explained in detail to me. That room is so full of toys it seemed more a playroom than a bedroom. Mama herself cleaned that room, and she hated housework. Just to see her room made me realize nothing had been too good for her. While my bedroom lacked toy shelves and her vast array of playthings, I felt cheated of a real childhood. Audrina the first and best is still in my youth, and everyone talked so much about her that I couldn't remember anything about me. I believed it was because of her that my memory was so full of holes. Papa would try to fill those holes by putting me in her rocking chair and making me rock and sing until I became an empty pitcher that was filled with everything. He wanted me to fill with the memories and capture her special powers since she was dead and didn't need them anymore. And if one ghost weren't enough, we had a second who came every Tuesday at 4. Tea time, we called Aunt Mercy Marie's day. There she sat on the piano in her black and white photograph in its silver frame, her fat face beaming a vivacious smile, her pale blue eyes staring out as she seest, which she couldn't. She was dead, and yet undead, just like my dead sister. My aunt and my mother would speak for Aunt Mercy Marie, and though through her they would let loose all the venom they had held back and saved for tea times. Strangely enough, my cousin Vera enjoyed these Tuesday tea times so much she'd find any reason to play hooky from school. Just to be there and hear all the ugly things my mother and half-sister could say to one another. They were Whitefern sisters, and once upon a far long ago time, that had meant something wonderful. Now it meant something sad, but they would never tell me exactly what. Long ago, the Whitefern family had been the most notable family in our Tidewater section of Virginia, given to country senators and vice presidents. But we'd fallen out of favor not just with the villagers, but also with everyone, and we were no longer honored or even respected. Our house was far from the nearest city of any size. Whitefern Village was 15 miles down a lonely country road, but we seldom went there. It was as if long ago some secret war had been declared, and we in our castle, as Papa liked to call our home, were hated by the serfs and lowlands. If any place in our vicinity could be called highlands, it was the slight hill on which Whitefern sat. Papa had to drive 30 miles to and from his stock brokerage office, and the friends we had lived in the city. Our nearest neighbors were 12 miles away as the car drove, 5 as the crow flew. Papa drove our only car to work, leaving us all without transportation, so often my Aunt Elizabeth would bemoan the day she'd sold her small car to buy the TV set. My aunt, who'd never been married, loved her portable television set with a 12-inch screen. She seldom allowed me to watch, though her daughter Vera could watch as much as she liked when she was home from school. That was another thing I couldn't understand, why Vera was allowed to go to school when I couldn't go. School was dangerous for me, but not for Vera. Naturally, I presumed there had to be something terribly wrong with me. My parents had to hide me away to keep me safe, if not from outsiders, then from myself. That was the scariest thought of all. At the age of 7, while other children boarded yellow school buses and rode off giggling and having fun, I sat down at the kitchen table and was taught how to read and write and subtract by my mother, who played the piano beautifully but was not very good at teaching anything but how to play the piano. Fortunately, or maybe not, my Aunt Elizabeth was there to help. She had once been a grade school teacher with ready slaps to deliver any boy who dared to call her a nasty name. Just one slap too many, and the parents had seen that my aunt was fired. Though she tried for many a year to find another teaching position, the word was out. My aunt had a ferocious temper and a ready hand. Aunt Elizabeth, like her daughter Vera, also had ready comments to criticize our way of living. According to my aunt, we all lived as antediluvian as the house in which we lived. Out of sync with the rest of the world, she'd say. In my dreams of home, Whitefern loomed up high and white against a dark and stormy sky, frightening to behold. It threatened in the night, but in the day it welcomed me with open arms. I had a habit of sitting outside on the lawn and admiring the grandness of Whitefern. It was a gingerbread Victorian house with many frills, with its white paint peeling, its dark blinds loose and crooked. It had 3 stories, with an attic and a basement toward the back of the house, where the spacious lawn inclined toward the River Lyell. As I stared at that house, I thought I had much in common with it. We were both antediluvian and out of sync. Our windows were madrid, many of them beautifully stained glass. The shutters, about to fall off, were so darkly red they appeared black from a distance, like dried blood. From the outside, the most marvelous thing of all were the balustrades on all the many porches, balconies, and verandas, designed to look like a stylized Whitefern's. In the very center of the dark roof was a round cupola, with a copper roof, now turned green from tarnish. It formed a point that was topped by a golden ball whose gold leaf was coming off a bit by bit each time it rained. The cupola was about 14 feet in diameter, and every single one of its many windows was made of line-stained glass, which seems to represent the angels of life and death. Inside and out, the ferns cascaded everywhere from wicker stands. There were other plants, but the ferns seemed to steal what moisture there was in the air, so soon all the other plants died. On a stealthy, timid feet, I played my small, lonely games in the great foyer, where the stained glass from the double front doors threw colorful patterns on the floor. Rapier-shaped colors sometimes, stabbing into my brain, and punching holes there. I also had little rhymes Vera had taught me that I said to protect myself from the colors. Step on black, live forever in a shack. Step on green, never be clean. Step on blue, work will never be through. Step on yellow, hear the world bellow. Step on red, soon be dead. Just so I wouldn't have to step on any color, I stole along near the walls, keeping to the shadows, listening to the clocks ticking away the wrong times, and the silly cuckoos going crazy in the night. When the wind blew hard, the shutters banged and the floors creaked. The furnace in the basement coughed and sputtered and groaned, and the wind chimes in the cupola tinkled and tinkled. Yet in the daytime there were things so wondrously grand in our house that I felt like Alice lost in a house full of heather and yon, in a house full of jewels. Art Deco lamps and objects to art were scattered heather and yon. Tiffany lamps rose up to throw more colors to pat on the walls. Crystal prisms dangled from lampshades, from all wall stones, from chandeliers, from gas lamps, catching colors, refracting rainbows that flashed like lightning whenever sunlight managed to steal throughout the lace curtains. We had a fireplace in every room. There were 8 of marble, many of lightly carved wood, and none were made of brick. Brick was not elegant enough for our type of house that seemed to despise simplicity. Our ceilings were high and carved with elaborate designs, making frames for biblical or romantic scenes. In the golden days, people had, or it seemed to my young mind and eyes, either too many clothes on or too little that wanted to stay in place. I wondered why the biblical scenes usually had more flesh showing than the ones where people were decidedly wicked. One could hardly believe those near-naked people were sincerely trying to follow where God would lead them. Bare bosoms of impressive proportions protruded brazenly in every room of our house but mine. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and several other dead-eyed presidents gazed day after day at the naked lady laying on a chaise across the way, as she forever dropped grapes into her gaping mouth. Naked baby boys flew about shamelessly, shooting aimless arrows, but the men always modestly hid their maleness behind some strategically placed leaf or graceful flow of drapery. Women were not so apt to hide what they had. I'd often thought as I gazed at them, they looked shy but acted bold. Aunt Elizabeth had come up from behind me once to explain bitterly that since most artists were men, it was only natural for them to delight in exploiting the nude female figure. Don't judge women by what you see in paintings or statues. Judge them only by what you yourself know about the women in your life. The day any man understands any woman will be the day the world comes to an end. Men are hateful, contrary creatures who say they want goddesses to put on pedestals. Once they have them up there, they rip off the halo, tear off the gown, and slice off the wings, so they can't fly, and then they kick the pedestal away so the woman falls at his feet, and he can scream out as he kicks her, tramp, or worse. To hear my Aunt Elizabeth talk, one would think she'd been married a dozen or more times, and 1,000 men had disappointed her. As far as I knew, only one man had. Our furniture had many styles, all of them fancy. It seemed each chair, each table, each sofa, lamp, pillow, house-like desk was in competition, trying to outdo the others. Although Aunt Elizabeth complained about the furniture, Mama would catch hold of my hand and lead me reverently from room to room, explaining that this table was a Renaissance revival, centerpiece made by Berkeley and Gay, Grand Rapids, Michigan. All antiques, Audrina, all worth their weight in gold. The bed in my room is 500 years old. Once kings and queens slept behind its curtains. Behind us, my aunt would snort her contempt and disbelief. Other people had electricity in all their rooms. We had electricity only in our kitchen and bathrooms. In other rooms, we used gas lamps because Mama thought them more flattering to her complexion. My aunt thought them a pain in the, but I wasn't supposed to use some of the words my aunt said readily. Even more than gas lamps, Mama loved candles burning, the logs in the fireplace snapping, and the crackling and making the shadows dance on the dark paneled walls. Our kitchen stuck out like a sore thumb with all its modern gadgets that made life bearable for Mama, who hated any kind of hard work, but loved cooking the gourmet meals my father had to have. The room was all favored most was the Roman rival salon. On its royal purple velvet lounging chaise with the gold cording tarnished and falling off where it wasn't fastened by fancy tassels, Mama would lie dressed in some film negligee on a soft summer dress. She didn't seem to notice that the stuffing was coming out and the springs poked through in a few places. Sprawled eloquently on that chaise, she'd read her romances and occasionally lift her eyes to stare dreamily off into space. I guess she was imagining herself in the arms of some handsome lover on the colorful cover of her paperback novel. I told myself bravely that someday I was going to have the nerve to read novels like that, wicked and beautiful at the same time. Though how I knew they were wicked books, I couldn't say, since I never read one. But almost naked people on the cover seemed awfully wicked.